Most days, I remember myself as a perfect child. I know I was a wild and wicked teenager. Spring of my senior year in high school, I was 16, just broken up with my first serious boyfriend. Received a scholarship to the college of my choice and was working 3 days a week after school at a sandal shop in Philadelphia Center City. The shop was operated by genuine hippies. This is 1967. My mom was 50-some, managing the library archives for Temple University and continuing the political activism that she had practiced her entire adult life. From fighting fascism as a whack with the US Army in World War II, as a Jewish lady living in a poor West Philadelphia neighborhood, fighting for the rights of African Americans to integrate restricted white housing in Philadelphia neighborhoods, to writing speeches and articles about the rights and responsibilities of librarians in times of civic unrest, FBI surveillance, racism, sexism, and censorship. Our mother-daughter conflicts were set in sociological and political frameworks at home. In arguments about my evening social activities, Mom's final words were, "There's a curfew in this town." Translation, "We do not get arrested for curfew violations for frivolous activities such as folk dancing or listening to banjo players in coffee houses." One evening, folk dancing with 200 of my nearest and dearest friends on the big stone square in front of the Philadelphia Art Museum, I heard about a party that some of those friends would be attending. It would take place on Friday, would begin on Friday afternoon with music and dancing and communal meals and camping out. This party would be at a farmhouse outside the city. It had been going on annually for years. Everybody would be there. Everybody had always been there. Only I was left out. Now, I knew that family negotiations were best undertaken one-on-one. My dad was a master of choosing his battles, both politically and on the domestic front. And he made it clear that it was my mom I needed to win over. Mom was implacable. I enumerated the academic, spiritual, political, and genealogical credentials of the party hosts. She did not care. Her 16-year-old would be attending no co-ed overnight campouts. Late in the game, I realized I needed a plan B. My first jailbreak was the logical solution. Now, I had heard stories from friends about kids who'd been thrown out of the house for adolescent defiance. The story most credible to me came from my mother just a couple years before. I had just started at Brooklyn College when your 16-year-old Aunt Irene left the apartment one afternoon for a quart of milk, ran into some friends she knew who were on their way to a party. She didn't come home for 24 hours. Your Grandpa Joe locked her out of the house for 2 years. This was 1933-34, the Great Depression. Irene stayed with friends, but she had to drop out of high school and take any miserable dead-end job she could find. 1967, I found my sleeping bag, packed a change of clothes, my toothbrush, another bag full of food, and called a banjo player I knew. When he picked me up on Friday afternoon, I explained that my parents would see this excursion as an act of defiance. This didn't seem to bother the banjo player at all. The party was just as promised. Huge, beautiful farmhouse, acres and acres to explore outside. There were about 75 people there, most under 25 years. About dinner time that evening, I found the big, heavy, black, airplane plastic rotary dial phone in the farmhouse and called home. Mom answered. I told her I was at the party, everything was fine, and I would be home the next afternoon. I was vague about where exactly I was. To this day, I do not know exactly where I was. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Mom said, I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up thinking, that went well. Spent the rest of the evening eating dinner around a campfire with a small circle of friends. Went to bed about 11 o'clock in my sleeping bag on the communal floor of the farmhouse. Next morning, more of the same, music and talking and laughter. Shared breakfast from our combined backpacks. And about dusk, somebody drove me home to my too quiet house. My dad met me in the kitchen. You have really distressed your mother. Go talk to her. I walked down the long, dim hallway to my parents' bedroom. Door was closed. I knocked. Come in. There was a lamp lit right by the door, but most of the room was dark. My mother was in the far corner. She'd been folding clothing, housekeeping chores. When she turned to face me, I could see she'd been crying. We locked eyes. She said, anybody asks, I don't have a daughter anymore. Whew. I had to think about that for a minute or two. Her words were harsh enough to be a slap in the face, but they were abstract, a bit theatrical, not concrete enough to frighten me. And I said, in my wicked 16-year-old insouciance, okay, and turned and went upstairs to my bedroom. My dad came up later in the evening and said, you have turned this family upside down. It will take you a while to make this right. I thought I was right. I never apologized. I was sorry to see my mother distressed, and I thought I had an inalienable right to independence. A couple of weeks later, we were arguing about something I wanted and she refused. I put my hands on my hips and said, I thought you said you didn't have a daughter. She turned from whatever she'd been doing at the kitchen sink and faced me. Fanny, when I said that, I was very upset. The reality is, you live in this house. You follow our rules. I had no words to answer. I was only there in that house for another couple months, and then I was off to Chicago to school. I came back for a day or two of university holidays, but then I was off again to visit friends in Boston, San Francisco, and Europe. From Chicago on, my mom treated me as an adult. We were respectful of each other's political and sociological frameworks, and I was very careful not to turn the family upside down. Mom died in 2011 at 94 years old, a rabble-rousing warrior woman to the very end. I miss her. She taught me to stand up for a principle, and if her principles were loftier than mine, she also showed me that I could occasionally live the wild life. Thank you.